this webinar for everyone. So good evening, and thank you for joining us on this exciting webinar about the worldwide recycling and secondhand industry. My name is Mike Orr, Recycling Director for the City of Cambridge, and with me is Adam Minter, Brooke Nash, and Meera Singh, and we will be going around for some introductions shortly on everyone. But I wanted to give you a quick little intro. But while I do that, I'm going to start sharing the screen with information about tonight's event. And I guess I need to make this bigger. Apologies. What's smaller, actually? Can people see the screen? How is it very small, or is it okay size?
We can see it. I think you want to go into slideshow mode, maybe.
Yeah, I'll try to make it as big as possible.
Yeah, that's better. And if you want to just, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, myself and recycling coordinators from across Massachusetts are excited to have you all on. You know, for a lot of us recycling coordinators, we don't have as much time to, you know, be doing all this education and outreach. And so a number of us, municipalities, are excited to have you. You can see we've got a couple dozen municipalities represented in the co-sponsoring of this event. And I've got just a short little thing on a few housekeeping items. So the webinar is recorded, and we will be posting this online. You can email me afterwards for a link. So whenever you got the registration link, you could just reply to that, and I could send you a link to the webinar. Feel free to insert any questions into the Q&A widget at the bottom of the screen, but please try to refrain from asking specific questions on how to dispose something specifically for your community. We will be sharing some information on how to generally figure out how to get rid of waste, but try to keep the Q&As to something relevant to the discussion this evening. So to start out, we want to do a quick poll of the audience and test what you know about recycling. So I've got the first poll. I'm going to launch it right now. And the question is, were you aware that textiles, meaning clothing, footwear, household textiles, are banned from the trash in Massachusetts? And we've already got 90 people that have filled it out. So thank you, everyone, for so quickly answering the poll. And while we do that, I'm going to put up on the screen information on our first speaker, Adam Minter. Okay, I think we've got to the end of the poll, and the results are 80% are aware that textiles are banned from the trash in Massachusetts. That's very good. The few people did not know, but now they do know. And we encourage everyone to find a way to dispose of textiles properly in their community. And we're going to get to some information later on about how to find out where in your community you could take textiles. So that was great. We wanted to just test the waters and see what everyone knows. So thank you, everyone, for filling that out. And I'm going to close that poll, and we're going to kick it over to Adam to be the first speaker for tonight. Adam, take it away.
Adam's muted.
Yeah, sorry, Adam, you're on mute.
Whoops. All right, now I'm on. All right, thank you. Anyway, hello, Massachusetts, and everybody listening from everywhere else. I know there's at least a couple people up in Vermont listening. I'm really glad to be here. I'm very glad to have this invitation. I'm a columnist with Bloomberg Opinion, And the way and I'm an author as well, and the way that I have always talked about recycling and sustainability is through stories and travel and showing people how it's done in various places. And that's kind of what I want to do with you today, is I want to take you on a little bit of a journey around the world of recycling and reuse, which is very important to me, that I've explored for over 2 decades. I'm going to share my screen here, and we are going to go right to the slideshow. Hold on and play from start. All right, so I'm just going to get it started because I know I'm on a limited clock. So this is a photo I took almost 2 decades ago in southern China. I was down there reporting a story on recycling, and I received a phone call from a friend of mine who owns a scrapyard, which you see right here, saying, I hear you're in town, want to come see my scrapyard? I love scrapyards. I said, sure. He brought me over, and we're walking around, and we saw this giant pile of stuff. And I asked him what it was, and he said, that's 3 shredded helicopters we imported from Los Angeles. Why would anybody want to import 3 shredded helicopters? Well, to recycle them. At the time, and even today, there's huge demand for raw materials in China. And one of the ways they fulfill that demand, instead of digging mines, though they've done that, is to import scrap metal that couldn't be used from the US. And that's kind of been a guiding principle for me in figuring out recycling and reuse around the world. What's the market? Who's buying this stuff? Why do they want it? Because if somebody doesn't want it, it's not recycling, it's trash. So that's been very important to me. So anyway, we go walking around the scrapyard, and I see this. And from a distance, I think, oh, a pile of extension cords. But as we get closer, I see, oh, a pile of Christmas tree lights. And let me just back up there. You can see how big that is. I'd been around scrapyards for a long time. I had never seen this many Christmas tree lights imported from the United States. My immediate thought was, I need to get to wherever this stuff is recycled. I asked if I could. The owner of the scrapyard said, can't do it today, but next time you come, let's have a look. I don't give up that easily. So I contacted my friend Johnson Zeng, who at the time was a Canadian scrap metal trader, and he would drive around the US going from scrapyard to scrapyard to scrapyard, buying with cash various kinds of wires and cables and sending them back to China for recycling. This is stuff that contained copper, aluminum, and plastic. And I knew that Johnson also bought Christmas tree lights. So he said, sure, come on the road with me for a week and you can see where I buy the stuff. Then I'll send you back to China to the factory where it's all recycled. I said, great, this will be an awesome story. So we drove around the United States for a week. We covered a lot of territory. Here were, just a bucket, it's a garbage can, I think, of Christmas tree lights. I know that was in Indiana, a dumpster of Christmas cheer in Ohio. And then we get to North Carolina, that's Johnson there, and you can see that's a couple pallets of Christmas tree lights. And after a week of seeing Christmas tree lights in scrapyards around the world, I said, Johnson, I get it, this is great. At the time I was living in Shanghai, who do I go and see? And he said, when you get back to Shanghai, you call my friend Raymond. Raymond was based in southern China, is based in southern China, not far from Guangzhou, which then and now was the manufacturing hub of China. Raymond bought Christmas tree lights, recycle it into copper for factories down there. So you go see Raymond, he'll show you how it's done. So that's what I did. I got back to Shanghai. I called up Raymond. He said, come on down. So here is Raymond's board of directors, I always call it. In China, just as in the US, the recycling industry, the scrap industry, junkyards, they start out as family businesses. And it's no different there than here. And this is quite a few members of Raymond's family. Raymond is kind of a shy guy. He doesn't like to be photographed. And all you can see in this photo are his legs. But, before somebody takes you to see their scrap recycling facility, they want to get to know you a little bit. They want to trust that you're going to present them fairly. And so after meeting the board of directors, if you will, I was then invited to go and see the recycling facility. Now, before Raymond did what you're about to see, there was a really simple way to recycle Christmas tree lights in China or in North Dakota or in Western Massachusetts, wherever. All you need to do is pile them up, get a can of gas and a matchbook, and you set them on fire. And a few hours later, you've got a bunch of cinders and some burnt copper. That works. It's not very good for the environment. That's how things were done for a very long time in China. But right around the 2000s, environmental consciousness was rising. People were buying homes. They didn't like living downstream from all kinds of pollution anymore. And so there was pressure for entrepreneurs like Raymond to do it better. And so what you're going to see here, I'm going to talk you through this video of Raymond's Christmas tree light recycling facility. I just want you to know ahead of time, this was designed by Raymond's nephew, who had gone to a technical college in Guangzhou, a very good one, to become an engineer. And instead of becoming an engineer, he decided to go into the family scrap recycling business because it's a good business. He can make a good living. It's raw materials, and China needs a lot of raw materials. So I am going to talk you through how this works. I'm going to play this now. Oh, I thought I was going to play this now. Let's try that again. Okay, so it's pretty simple. You cut a hunk of Christmas tree lights and you put it in this thing. Inside there are spinning blades that chop up those lights. That's not smoke, you see, it's steam. There's water flowing in to cool it down because those blades and the Christmas tree lights get hot. What comes out is this goop: plastic, rubber, metal, glass. And what you do is you shovel it onto these tables. It's kind of like panning for gold. They're tilted up and there's water shooting up the table. And what it does is it washes off the lightweight stuff, tilted up. The plastic goes off one end, and the heavier stuff, the copper, as you can see, the copper, we're playing with the specific gravities, floats off on the other side. And it's all done with water. This was not easy to set up. It took months to get it calibrated, and you can see the copper coming out pretty clean. It can be then sent to be refined. The question I always get asked about this system is what happens to the water? And what happens to the water is it just keeps getting circulated through the system. So once it's sucked up into the tube and put into the system, it just stays there until it evaporates and need more. So nothing's getting dumped back into the water source. Actually, there was a small creek not too far away from this plant from where it's coming. And you can see, if you look into here, this is pretty clean. You can send this for recycling. The other question I often get about Christmas tree light recycling is, okay, what happens to this copper and this brass? It may be refined down again. They may put it in there and they can actually extract out some of the brass from the copper. But in general, the best thing to do with this is send it to be made into new Christmas tree lights. So round and round it goes. It comes back to Massachusetts and people put it on their tree and then they recycle it. It goes back to China. At least that's how it was being done 10 years ago. As for the rubber, the plastic, at the time, Raymond was selling it to a slipper sole manufacturer. So you could be walking on, if you have a pair of flip-flops, walking on Christmas past. So it's great. It's a low-tech way of fixing a very big environmental problem. And it's just one of the many innovations that you would see in China during this period. You can see right here, this gives you a better view of how this all works. You can see the tilt up and the specific gravity doing what it's supposed to do in the plastic being, you can't see the plastic being washed off, but the plastic's being washed elsewhere. So it's great. And there are higher tech versions of this now. You find them all over the world. The US has some very advanced plants that use this and other technologies to separate out all kinds of metals. So it's great. It's sustainability. 10 years ago, I was watching this happen. And what was really interesting is, this was the peak, at least it felt like the peak of the US-China recycling trade. And we've all heard a lot about this over the years and what happened in 2018, 2019. China cut off US recycling, right? That's what we always hear, a national sword. I want to show you something really interesting that maybe will dispel, I don't know if you want to call it a stereotype, but an urban myth of sorts. This is a tremendous chart that comes from a friend of mine, Joe Pickard, at the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries in Washington, D.C. They're a trade association representing the recycling industry. This shows you the export of all scrap. So paper, plastic, textiles, wood even, whatever it is, to China from 94 to 2018. As you can see, that trade peaked in 2011. And it started declining in 2012, and it declined precipitously, really starting around 2014 into 2018. Why did that happen? It happened because China's economy was slowing down and they were developing their own recycling. They have their own sources. They didn't need US raw materials anymore. You know, we have it in our head that the reason China stopped recycling US stuff is for environmental reasons. That is not the primary reason. The primary reason is they had started developing their own resources. And I saw that happen because I was resident in Shanghai, in China from 2002 to 2014. And around 2014, I started thinking more seriously, actually earlier than that, about reuse. If China's not going to recycle this stuff, what's going to happen with it? How is it going to be reused? Are there alternatives? And that is a massive question that I wrote an entire book about, but I'm going to show you just one side of this story. Now, when I tell most people, if I say the words China recycling, I think the image that pops up in the head is something like this from a very famous 60 Minutes documentary segment from 2008, I believe it is, called The Wasteland. And it was focused on a place called Guiyu, which is in southern China, which was called the world's largest recycling zone, dumping zone. And these were pictures taken there. It's funny, if you look at this, there's no electronics on fire there. That's actually a trash dump. That's not a good thing. But I was always a little suspicious of this because I would see a lot of videos of this saying there's a lot of electronics being dumped in these places, but you would oftentimes not see electronics. So what happens? Well, I took the trouble to go down there myself. And here's inside a Guiyu warehouse. And what you see here are a lot of circuit boards from Samsung and for Samsung phones. And these were bought out of a factory down south in China. For whatever reason, the factory didn't want them. Maybe they were surplus, maybe there were some defects. But the interesting thing is they weren't being burnt. Instead, people were sorting them out and they were going to sell them to other factories to remake into new Samsungs, not with the authorization of Samsung. But for me, it was kind of an aha moment because one bad circuit board is maybe junk. But if you've got 2,000 of the same one, it's something you can call inventory and reuse it in a way. And you can go deeper into this. Here's another Guiyu factory space. These are circuit boards that have been pulled off, not those particular, or these are chips having been pulled off and capacitors pulled off of various circuit boards. And what's being done with them? They're being sorted out. And what happens after they're sorted out? They can be resold in markets all over China for use in new electronics. And a lot of these used electronics get put into new electronics and sold within China and in other emerging market countries. And this is just one such market. This is a place called SEG Plaza in Shenzhen, which is 12 stories of market stalls like this. And they are all selling used components that have been extracted. People see the value. It's not junk. It shouldn't be melted and set on fire to get the gold out because somebody can reuse it. To me, that was when I sort of figured out for myself, other people knew it obviously because there's millions of people employed doing this, but when I figured it out for myself, that was kind of an aha moment. This idea that we can dig deep into a waste chain, turn it into a value chain. And this happens every day, everywhere. This is a Goodwill in Tucson, Arizona. And they're essentially doing what you saw with those circuit boards, the capacitors coming off going in one bin, the chips going into another, only instead of dealing in chips and capacitors, these folks, and I love Goodwills and the people who work in the back room because they're incredibly knowledgeable about clothes. They know just by touch what's worth keeping, what's a $2.99 garment versus a $4.99 garment. They're sorting it, and some of this will go on the sales floor. Some of it will be exported. Where is it exported to? Guys aren't actually that far away. This is Mississauga, Ontario, which is one of the great clothing sorting hubs in the world. Stuff that doesn't sell in Goodwills and other thrift shops around the world is bought by less than 20 large sorting operations in Mississauga, Ontario, outside of Toronto, where they sort it for various markets. Some of these clothes will be sorted. It's not just down to t-shirts. It's this kind of t-shirt works in Congo, and this kind of t-shirt works in Malaysia, and this kind of t-shirt works in India. It gets distilled down further. Again, sorting, finding the value chain, creating the value chain. Clothes aren't waste. A lot of it isn't waste. It's actually something that has value. And this is the next link in the chain. Then we go one step further into the chain, just like the electronics. Here is a sorting warehouse in Cotonou, Benin, the West African country that borders Nigeria, which gets a huge amount of clothes that are sorted and sent to Nigeria. These gentlemen are sorting again. After they've been sorted for Benin, they sort by village or city. Folks in Lagos like this kind of garment. Folks in northern Nigeria like this kind of garment. again, it's creating value out of something where if you look at that big pile of stuff there, most people in the US are going to say that's trash, but it's just a matter of extracting the value. As we just heard in the poll, textiles are not waste. So I want to show you a really cool way this works as well. I think some folks, if you look at this, you'll see that those are iPhone cases. This is back in southern China. And these photos I'm going to show you are taken in a mall that's devoted to basically assembling new iPhones from recycled iPhones and from surplus parts that come out of iPhone factories. And so you can see some iPhone backings here. This is in Shenzhen. Here are screens. And these screens, can be attached. Anybody can go in there and get a screen. But what happens a lot of times is people will come in and buy 200 of these and 200 backs and whatever goes into the iPhone and make a new one. These are waste pieces or surplus pieces, and they're going to make something out of them. And again, here is 1/6 of this market, which is 3 stories, and there's 3 different rooms, and they are all selling iPhone parts because it's not just stuff being imported, say, from the US and Europe, but China, of course, is Apple's second largest market, and that stuff needs to go somewhere. And so you can assemble a phone there. Again, stuff that we would think of that maybe the Genius Bar would not want to recycle for us, you can get it taken care of in this, they'll take care of it in this market and actually turn it into a phone. Again, finding value, promoting the value chains. And if you don't believe me, take notes. This is a great video you can find on YouTube where you actually had a gentleman, and I wish I'd thought of doing this, went into Shenzhen, into the Huaqiangbei neighborhood, which is where this all happens. And he went and he bought all the parts to make his own iPhone, and he did it. And it's about, you can see it's about 23 minutes long. And I highly recommend it. It will change how you think about this waste value chain and when we should recycle something instead of reusing it. All right, so let's come back to New England here. This is another example of finding value in stuff that I think a lot of us, if we watch too many documentaries about waste in emerging markets, think of as waste. This is the warehouse for Good Point Recycling in Middlebury, and I know Good Point serves some of the communities up and around the Boston area. I think there's folks listening who know Good Point quite well. The owner of Good Point has been sending and recycling TVs for reuse or for other use for raw materials, depending on the state of them, for many years. He's an innovative recycler. His name's Robin Ingenthron. Anyway, Robin faced an issue many years ago, what to do with all of these flat panels that were coming into the warehouse there. Like me, if Robin sees something that most people want to recycle, Robin's initial instinct, I think I'm going to speak for Robin, he may tell me after this presentation I shouldn't, but I think his first instinct is to reuse it. So, and where Robin thought some of the stuff might be well reused is Ghana. Now, if I say to the folks on this call, Ghana, used electronics, you probably think of something like this. This is a place in Ghana called Agbogbloshie, and it has been called, just like Gweyu was called incorrectly, the world's largest e-waste dump. You can see there's not a lot of e-waste on the ground there. What you see being burnt there is mostly wire extracted from automobiles, but that hasn't stopped journalists from labeling it something different. What happens to electronics if they find their way to Ghana? Well, here is Robin in the middle, and on his right, he's talking to a gentleman by the name of Olu, who has become a friend of mine, lovely guy. And Olu is somebody who grew up in Agbogbloshie a little bit. After he finished high school, he moved down from the northern Ghana into Agbogbloshie. He had done some of the burning there, but along the way, he started noticing that there's electronics repair shops around Agbogbloshie. And he's noticing that some of the electronics coming into Agbogbloshie don't go into the burn piles, they go into the repair shops. And so he learned how to repair computers. He learned that there were all these computers that maybe folks in Accra, Ghana didn't want, or some computers being imported that people in wealthier countries didn't want. And he knew there was a need for those computers, for those monitors back home in Tamale, which is in northern Ghana. And so having learned the business a little bit, he brought the business home and he began working with friends and family in Tamale, bringing electronics up from southern Ghana to northern Ghana. And you can see Olu right here standing next to what some folks might call e-waste, but what Olu calls inventory. These monitors, which have been brought up to Tamale, they all work. They've all been tested. They came from overseas, and they will be sold via a number of outlets that Olu works with to everyone from schools to hospitals to parents wanting to provide a computer for their child. And you name the use case, Olu and his friends and partners and the people he works with have somebody who wants to buy it. This is the main street in Tamale, Ghana, which is where Olu is resident and where he sells. And one of the things that I found really interesting in Tamale is if you walk around to the retail outlets there, I would say 80%, maybe 90% of the retail in Tamale, Ghana is secondhand. It's stuff imported, and people found the value in it, and they sell it in outlets there. The number of new goods outlets there is very small. One of these used outlets is one that Olu works with and some other folks work with, is Chendiva Enterprises. And you can see, again, what some people would look at as e-waste, these old desktops. Again, it is inventory. And it's inventory that matters to the people of Tamale, because they don't have a Best Buy there. They aren't going to order a new computer or even a used refurbished computer from Dell. It's going to have to come in from somewhere else. And it's for a lot of reasons. One has to do with logistics, but it also has to do with price point. The cost of a new computer compared to a used one, say 5-year-old used one, is vast. And that price point makes it available to folks who otherwise wouldn't have access to the technology. It bridges the digital divide. If you go back down to the southern part of Ghana, to Accra, this is a company called Buji Computers, where I spent some time in Accra, which is the capital of Ghana. And it's an interesting place for me because I learned a little bit about how they manage repairs. If you go into the back room at Buji, you'll see what you see here, which is a bunch of computers on a shelf, kind of like a library. Those aren't for sale. Those computers have been brought in. Maybe they were sold back to the store by a user. Maybe they were bought by the owner of Buji, who saw that the computer maybe doesn't have a market as a new computer, but it may have parts inside of it that can be used to repair a computer. So what you see going on here, somebody's monitor burnt out. Well, they bring in the computer. If it's a 6-7-year-old computer, say in Boston, and you bring it in and you say, my monitor stopped working, they're going to tell you at whatever repair shop you go to, sorry, you're out of luck with it. They're not making the monitor anymore. It's probably not worth the cost. You'd be better off buying a new machine. In Ghana and across emerging markets, what they'll do is go in and take something off the shelf. That's the library of parts. And attach it, and voila, you're on your way. The computer works again. It's awesome. And there's no reason we can't do that in the US, but the price points are different. And so that's kind of why it doesn't happen at a place like the Apple Store. So here we are back in Vermont. Robin, who's one of my favorite recyclers, over the years, watched what was going on in Ghana and in the places he traveled. And he became very intrigued by the idea of pulling out and selling parts from televisions, stuff that maybe didn't have a market as a television anymore, but maybe the parts inside of those televisions had a market somewhere. They could be reused, and they could help Robin's business as well, forming a source of revenue. And so what you see going on here is the little studio set up in the warehouse, where what they'll do is they'll take apart the television, and the various marketable parts, they'll photograph it and post them for sale on sites like eBay. They become e-commerce. And these parts of older televisions are sold in the US and around the world. And it's become, for Robin, it's become a very good business. And it's an example, I think, and one of the things I think is so cool about it is I think there's an attitude in the US and in Europe that emerging markets should learn from advanced recyclers in the US and Europe. But what Robin is showing is that there's something to be, that some of it can flow in the other direction as well. And there's something to be learned from Ghana. Here is Robin with Wahab Muhammad, my good friend who lives in Tamale, and Wahab works with Olu as well. And this is Wahab on a visit to Middlebury, to Robin's plant that's in Middlebury. And Robin just handed Wahab a bunch of parts that he's asked Wahab to take back to Tamale to see if there's a market for them. To see what the repair people think about these television parts in Tamale. And so they're discussing it right here. You're seeing it as it happens. And later on, this is a screen grab that Robin gave me. This is Wahab with one of the master television technicians in all of Ghana, showing him what he has available. It's called building market. It's called creating value chains, waste value chains, if you want to call it. I say reusable value chains, whatever it is. This is how it happens. And this is how we keep this stuff in circulation longer. And this is the kind of thing that gets me excited. You know, you develop a market. I want to just finish briefly saying where I see markets being developed right now, and that is in textiles. And I know it's quite a leap, but there's just so much going on in the world of reuse and recycling. These are new numbers that just came out in the last couple of weeks. ThreadUp, which I think many of you have heard of, is an online marketplace for secondhand clothes. And every year they do a study of the markets, and the markets are amazing. If you're a little bit older like me, you probably grew up thinking of thrift stores in one certain way. That is not how Gen Z thinks about thrift stores anymore. 82% of Gen Z considered the resale value of apparel before buying it. That was not me in my 20s or any of my peers. There's a market emerging here. It's a value chain that's emerging here. And it's super, super exciting to me. I think it holds real promise, not just in the US, but even globally, because this is a global phenomenon. And how does it work? I mean, this is just one example. Here's a high-end brand, Patagonia. They have set up their own e-commerce outlet now where they sell used stuff because there's a market there where there wasn't before. And again, that pulls stuff out of that waste chain. You may say, well, the stuff that was at Goodwill from Patagonia might have sold before anyway. Maybe it would have, maybe it wouldn't have. If you spend enough time at, thrift stores, stuff doesn't always sell, even the highest value stuff. And of course, peer-to-peer is also this very exciting opportunity and this value chain emerging, just as we've seen with electronics emerge in these value chains in places like Ghana, in places like China. Again, I think it's the most exciting area in all of the peer-to-peer for textiles, one of the most exciting areas in sustainability right now. And it's something I'll be writing about more and more. So on that very optimistic note, and I am a waste, recycling, reuse optimist, I'm just going to end with my favorite recycler, Rey from the Star Wars series. If you don't know her, you should know her. And I guess she's getting a new trilogy all her own, is just what I was reading the other day. You could see she's there. She's just recovered a bunch of stuff from a giant spaceship for reuse. She's not going to have it melted down. And I love Rey's emphasis on reusing. And I hope that as folks in New England and Massachusetts move forward, that reuse and finding places for these new outlets continues to be prioritized.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Adam. That was very enlightening. That information on just like how the secondhand industry works is just, it's just beyond the scope of what we can imagine from, an American standpoint. So that's one reason why I really wanted to have you on tonight, because I think it helps to really show what's going on behind the curtain. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so keep the questions coming, folks. You can put them in the Q&A box down below. We're going to get to that in the next 45 minutes or so. Again, encourage you all to check out Adam Minter's 2 books. They're fascinating. You really get like a boots on the ground kind of perspective on what's happening with recycling, reuse, secondhand industry. And I really encourage folks to check that out. All right, so we're going to pivot over to the next portion. Is I want to do a poll of our attendees. So the next poll is going up right now. And in the meantime, I will ask the recycling coordinators to turn on your video, and we're going to introduce each of you to the people on the call so you can say hi to your constituents. So while the poll's going, I'm gonna give people some time. This is a tough question, and I don't know if everyone's gonna get it right, so we will see. Let's start off from my screen. I'm gonna go alphabetical. So let's see. I've got the first one is Allison. Are you on, Allison? You could just
Yes,
say
I am, Mike.
the name and the city you represent.
Yes,
Or town.
I'm the environmental outreach coordinator for. Thank you for having me this evening, and thank you to you all who are attending and watching this webinar right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. And Anya from Watertown.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anya. I'm the Recycling and Sustainability Coordinator for Watertown. I'm really excited to be here. And Adam, thank you for a great presentation and looking forward to the next ones.
Awesome. Thanks, Anya. And let's go to Charlotte from Arlington.
Have a camera. This is Recycling Coordinator Charlotte Milan from Arlington. Thanks for all you Arlington people that showed up tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Charlotte. And Elise, I believe from Somerville.
Hi, I'm Elise Belarge, and I am the Sustainability Planner for the City of Somerville, and I'm very happy to be here and be learning about all these sort of exciting recycling things.
Awesome. Thank you. Katie, Brookline.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Weatherseed. I am the Zero Waste Program Manager for the town of Brookline. Thrilled to be here with you all and so grateful to be able to serve as a sponsor for tonight.
Thank you, Katie. And Marissa, and I don't want to butcher, it's the Greater New Bedford Refuse. Maybe you'll tell us what it is that you represent.
So my name's Marissa Perez Dormitzer, and I'm the Waste Reduction Manager for the Greater New Bedford Regional Refuse Management District. So I serve the city of New Bedford and the town of Dartmouth, and we run the local landfill where the trash is disposed.
Awesome. Thanks, Marissa. And Juanita from Newton.
Hi, I'm Juanita Scrapert. I am the Director of Sustainable Materials Management for the City of Newton. And we handle everything having to do with trash recycling, yard waste, household hazardous waste, and street sweeping also.
Okay, thanks, Juanita. Sorry, I have a fire truck going by. And I'm Mike Orr. I'm the Recycling Director for the City of Cambridge. And we're all so happy that everyone could be on tonight. We've got more than 180 attendees, and we are recording this. So if each of these municipalities can get the file and put it on YouTube for their webpage, and so we can make this broadly available for the future. Okay, so the poll has come to an end, and I'm going to share the results. And the question is, which two recyclables are most valuable in recycling? And so there's a couple options up there. And the number one option that people selected was glass and aluminum, and that is incorrect. The second most popular option, aluminum and paper, also incorrect. And I think most people will be surprised to learn that it's aluminum and plastic is the correct answer. And so that was a little bit of a trick question. It's something that us in the industry know about, but you might, not hear about it elsewhere. But aluminum is the number one most valuable product in a recycling. Plastics are number two. Now, not every plastic is recyclable, but the ones that are recyclable, very, very valuable. As a matter of fact, some of the plastics can be almost as valuable as aluminum during certain COVID times. So it's great to kind of get that feedback and hear where people are at with this, and encourage you all to continue recycling. Okay, so I'm going to introduce us to the next speaker. I'm going to quickly share her information. Meera Singh. She splits her time between Cambridge and Mumbai. She's got a very exciting presentation in store for us. And so I've got her speaker info up here. It's also on the invite. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing it. I'm going to kick it over to Meera, because let's just jump right in and learn a little bit more about what's going on in Mumbai.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Let's see. Oops, sorry. Give me a minute, please. Maybe you can take another quiz question, Mike, while I.
Well, we will have a third poll after yours, and that'll be another very exciting one. It might be a tough question coming up. And so we're excited to see if people will understand this. And, while Amir is getting stuff pulled up, I do want to say that, we were selective in how we approached who the speakers would be tonight. We wanted to really kind of bring some very different perspectives to the world of recycling and secondhand, because it's a lot more complicated and dense than what you see at the curb or what you might see in pamphlets from your town or municipality. And so it's a very it's a big industry. It's not just a small little thing that we do in each municipality. These are billion-dollar companies we're talking about, and billion-dollar operations. And so I think Mira's got her screen up. If you want to start your presentation, Mira.
Just
And
a minute. It keeps going back to the video we were checking out.
oh, there it goes. All right, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to give you a glimpse into some fascinating aspects of recycling in Mumbai, which is very similar to what happens all over the country. Many of the images I will share with you today are ones that I've taken when I'm out and about on the streets of Mumbai, and Mumbai is where I grew up. Some quick facts. 21 million people live in the Mumbai metro area. About 6,800 tons of municipal waste are generated daily. Most of this ends up in landfills, and most of it is not sorted. The last fact, I'm just going to say there are thousands of waste pickers in Mumbai, because there was a huge range while I did my research. It was hard to get clarity on the number. In this first section, I'm going to talk about raddiwalas. Raddi means scrap or junk in Hindi, and a raddiwala is a recycling vendor, someone who deals in scrap. And this is typically how households dispose of their recyclable waste. And I must say that this was the way it was done when I was a kid, which was several decades ago, and it's the same way even now. Also, I think most people who call the raddiwala to their house to sell their junk don't do it to save the environment. I think their thinking is, why should I throw something if I can earn some money, even if it's a small amount? So these are pictures I took in 2019 while I was in Mumbai, and we happened to call our neighborhood raddiwala, the recycling vendor, to the house. And typically what happens is recyclable materials, which include newspaper and metal and plastic and glass, and other items also, actually, like suitcases or old pots and pans that you don't want to use anymore. These are stored, and then when there's enough to make it worthwhile for the raddiwala to come in, you call them in. And here is Mr. Pandey, who has sorted out what we stored and filled it into various bags so he can weigh them. And here you see him weighing our junk. And that day we actually earned about $3. after that was all done, I followed him downstairs to look at, to watch and take pictures as he loaded up what he bought from us. And here he is loading up his bicycle with all these bags you can see. And he secures them with string, and then off he rides away to the kiosk where he works. And this is just down the street from my home. So I followed him and to continue the photo shoot. Now at this kiosk, there's his colleague. Further sorting gets done, and the items are stored here until they are sold to scrap dealers, who eventually will sell them to recycling factories. Now, while I was here, this gentleman in the red t-shirt, he came to sell cardboard. And there are thousands of stores across the city like this, where people come to sell their recyclable waste or sell their old books and magazines, and even buy old books and magazines. And in fact, when I was a kid, my friends and I, we used to buy used Archie comics from stores like this. This is another outside another recycling kiosk, and it's very common in Mumbai to see heaps of junk like this waiting to be sorted before they go on to the next step in their journey. Now, what I just shared with you is what happens when recycling from homes is sold directly to vendors. But after this leaves our house and after our trash leaves homes in Mumbai, there's a whole nother ecosystem of what happens with the trash. And this leads me to talk about waste pickers. And I like to call them the unsung heroes of the recycling industry. Now, waste pickers are defined as people who are informally engaged in India's recycling sector. Though this image here shows you, it's from an industry journal, and it shows you that waste pickers are at the base of this whole system, the informal recycling system, but they have a very, very important role, indeed, like the foundation of India's recycling system. And they save municipalities significant amount of money, and they save a lot of material that pollutes the environment from going into water bodies and into the sea and land. And they also are saving things, literally pulling out recyclables from landfills. Now here, the picture on the top left is of a waste picker. She's literally in a dumpster, and she is going to collect recyclables from dumpsters, from streets where people have littered and discarded waste, from, like I said, landfills, from transfer stations. And she will fill up her bags, and she might go to a small scrap dealer, or she might end up in a materials recovery facility like the one you see on the bottom right, where the materials get further sorted. Now, this is a unit. This, oh, I must point out, do you notice the clothes that are hanging to dry, hanging out to dry on the fence? So at this facility, the people who work there literally live there, and their workspace also serves as their living area and their dining area, their kitchens, and also their laundry rooms. So I took this picture of this chart, this graph at the same materials recovery facility. And this was just hanging up, thumbtacked on a wall there. And it's actually very, it shows how methodical this whole informal system is, because it lists not only the names of the individual waste pickers, but the areas they cover. And interestingly, also the distance from the sea. Bombay is along the Arabian Sea. It's a coastal city. And I learned recently that is for the plastics recycling company to earn credits from this international certification, which says, which gives you credit if you can save plastics from entering the ocean-bound plastic certification standards. So that was really interesting to learn. So it's not just the waste pickers who collect recyclable materials, but this lady I happened to see on a morning walk a few months ago in Mumbai, and she was picking up discarded plastic bottles, and just to make an extra buck. So you see that often happening too. Now, waste pickers, crucial though they are to the recycling system, they do face a lot of challenges, and they really live a very difficult life. Most of them are very, very poor and what's considered marginalized members of society. They mostly come from rural areas where there are very few work opportunities. So they come to the cities to find work. But because they are either illiterate or don't have employment skills, but also considered to be of lower castes, they end up doing work that is too dirty for others to do. And so they end up becoming waste pickers. And economically too, even though they are so valuable to the recycling system, they are excluded from the mainstream. They are not employed by the city governments. There's no safety net for them. There's no social security. During the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown, literally their daily wages were abruptly, they just came to an end because no one went out, nothing was happening. So it's difficult to even imagine how they survived. And they also suffer from the fluctuation in recycling markets. Also, this business they're in, because in India, typically, not just in the recycling market, but it's very common, the safety issues always pose a challenge. There are very few arrangements for people to save themselves from hazardous activities. So waste pickers literally are going through all this trash and into the landfills and dumps and things, foraging with no gloves, not even gloves or masks. They're just using their bare hands with the large bags that they carry, separating everything manually, and they have no idea of how these materials can impact their health. Dismal though the situation really is, there is now some awareness, and the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai has, historically, it really hasn't been bothered so much with the welfare of these waste pickers, but of late they have set up the sorting sheds for dry materials, dry recyclables across the city. And thanks to the efforts of waste picker associations, these sorting sheds are run by waste pickers. And the municipality also helps them transport the recyclables, from the collection centers to the recyclers. But there are not enough of these sorting centers still. So a lot still needs to be done, but small steps, at least it's a beginning. This is my good news slide. For many decades, there are various NGOs and waste picker associations and self-help groups who really have worked hard to organize and mobilize waste pickers and offer them support by way of setting up cooperatives to give them financial assistance, training, and health and education support too. So even though there's a lot going on, the problem is so huge that a lot more needs to be done to support them. I'm now going to move on to just sharing with you about two innovative recycling initiatives. And these are projects that were started just by everyday, regular citizens who are passionate about the environment, and they took these steps, which are really making a big impact. So the first one I'll talk to you about is the milk bag project. And actually, my friend and colleague, who hopefully is watching this right now, she came across a video which was sent. A woman made a video about how to cut milk bags so as to save the ends from just being ending up in water and land bodies. Now, most people in India receive milk in plastic bags, as you can see on the left over here. And when you snip off the, a corner, a bit at the corner, the little piece that gets snipped off would never, ever get into the recycling system. So this video went around where this lady suggested that you just make a slit and then pour out the milk. So my friend, she decided, hey, this is great. Why don't we make a video to suggest that people send us their used milk bags to get recycled, and also show them how to cut it the right way. Well, this video went viral, and soon there were people from across the country sending their used milk bags, used clean milk bags to be recycled. And you can see here, this is a picture from where they were being stored, and over 2 tons of milk bags have been saved from landfills. And I will just share with you a short video. Let's see.
ये मिल्क है जो इस प्लास्टिक पैकेजिंग में आता है, और एक बार मिल्क को इस पैकेट से कोई यूज नहीं होता, राइट?
Wrong. ये plastic wrappers.
Sorry, the video is not showing. I think you have to exit out of the presentation real quick.
Oh, sorry.
And if you want, I can do it.
Okay.
Does that help? Okay. Well, here, I'll show it at the end. Why don't you keep going?
Okay.
Yeah.
जो इस प्लास्टिक पैकेजिंग में आता है, और एक बार मिल्क
You did. It's a very exciting video, so everyone be ready. Okay, we have just 1 or 2 more minutes.
Okay. I'm almost done here. How do I get out of this? Okay.
I think you.
I am just gonna resume my screen share. Come back to this. Sorry about that. Okay.
Yeah, number 24, maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
And make it large if you could.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
There it is.
So the next one, this is about flower cycling. I'm calling it flower cycling. In India, millions of tons of flowers are offered every day for worship in temples. And because these are used for worship, people don't want to throw the used flowers from the temples or in their homes in the trash, and they are either thrown in rivers or into the ocean, or just left at at the base of trees that are considered to be sacred. And often this is in plastic bags. Well, you can all imagine how this pollutes the environment. And some years ago, these two young men set up a system where these flowers get repurposed into incense sticks and soaps and an eco-friendly styrofoam called Florafoam. And most recently, I read also into vegan leather called Fleather. Finally, repair and reuse enterprises are ubiquitous in India. And this is historic, where people repaired things to reuse them. And fortunately, this practice continues today. So a mochi or a cobbler on the sidewalks is found in almost every neighborhood. And they don't just repair shoes, but also things like belts and bags and suitcases and even umbrellas. Every market will have a sidewalk tailor, where they just rent a little space outside a store that'll fit their sewing machine, and you bring your stuff to repair. And I'm telling you, not one trip goes by when I'm in India where I don't use either a mochi or a tailor. And finally, you also have these stores which repair appliances. I recently had a pressure cooker gasket replaced and a kitchen blender repaired. So you'll find these repair and reuse stores all over the country, actually. And because of India's massive population, labor is cheap. So they, they can be afforded by people of all classes. So that's the end of my presentation. Mike, if you're going to share the video, thank you.
Thank you, Mira. That was very interesting. Again, I think it's so interesting to learn that there's so many different things happening in different parts of the world that we're just not aware of. Like how much reuse and repair that happens in India is fascinating, and cultural norms and how you can be innovative about finding solutions to waste when you've got milk bags, or when you have these items that go out into the river to that you want to collect, so you don't have to pollute the environment. And so very interesting. And I'll share the milk bag thing at the end, because we're actually running a little bit behind on time. But thanks again. And we're going to go right into the third poll, because I want to get to that so that we can get to Brooke, our final presenter. And so the poll number 3 is up. We want to know, what is the largest component of Massachusetts trash by weight? So we're going to let that poll run for a second. And in the meantime, I'm going to share the screen to show you a little bit about our final speaker. So Brooke Nash works for Mass DEP, and she's been in the recycling industry for more than 40 years, basically her entire career. And she is actually going to be retiring soon from Mass DEP. And so she has been a force for such good progress in Massachusetts to help keep moving the needle forward on waste reduction. So we're really excited that she's here tonight. And I can't wait to have her up here to do her presentation and kind of bring all this waste discussion back home to Massachusetts, and to help you figure out what you can be doing next to kind of move the needle. So I've got the poll, and I think we're just about hit the end of people participating. We have 135 that filled it out. And the results are 85% of people believe that food waste is the largest component of our trash. And I am so excited to hear that so many people got it right. Food waste is the #1 item in our trash in Massachusetts, and thus it has the greatest potential for us to reduce that. So great job, everyone. That was nailed it on the head. Okay, so we've got Brooke to go up for about 15-20 minutes, and then we've got Q&A at the end, so stick around if you'd like. And I'm going to kick it right over to Brooke, and I believe, Brooke, you need me to present for you.
Yes, if you would pull up my slides, Mike, I appreciate that, and I'll just prompt you with next slide. So if we can go into, there we go. Okay, perfect. So hi, everybody. I'm just really excited to be here, especially joining these esteemed panelists. Wow, I've heard Adam present before. I've read one of his 2 books. I'm a huge fan. And Mira, really, I just, learned so much. I love the leather, was that it? And we really need to take a page out of your book with repair. We're way behind in the States on that, but we'll touch on that briefly. So anyway, we've been around the world. We're going to come back to Massachusetts, take you into a quick journey and sort of lift the curtain on how our recycling system works here and where our cans and bottles and paper go after they've left your curb or your municipal transfer station. So next slide, please. So for the majority of Massachusetts residents, the first stop for our recyclables after we put them at the curb or is a MRF, and that stands for Materials Recovery Facility. Massachusetts is home to 9 MRFs, and they process more than 638,000 tons of plastic containers, paper bottles, cans, and glass every year. They sort and process that. The state's first MRF was built in 1990 by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in Springfield, and then there are 8 others that were built after that, and those are owned by private companies. So at a MRF, the recycling truck empties the load of recyclables on the tipping floor, and the material gets loaded into a conveyor belt and begins its journey through this sorting process. In the pre-sort stage, workers manually pick off contaminants, which is a fancy word for stuff that doesn't belong in the recycling bin, and actually which can harm workers and damage equipment at the MRF. Today's MRFs employ a range of technology from magnets to eddy currents to pull off aluminum, star screens that separate paper, and near infrared optical sorters that sort out our plastics by resin type. And some are beginning to bring in robotics and artificial intelligence. So MRF technology is constantly evolving. Next slide, please. So if you want to find out which MRF takes your community's recyclables, you can do that by going to recyclesmartma.org and click on the tab on the top menu called Where Does It Go? You can enter your zip code and you'll find the name, location, and a few details about the MRF that your community sends its material to. If you take your recyclables to a transfer station and sort them into multiple categories there, then your recyclables generally are probably skipping the MRF because they're already sorted, and they go straight to a processor or an end market. Next slide. So back to the MRF, once the material is cleaned and it's sorted into all these different separate streams, and it's baled or compressed into these large 1,000-pound bales, and it's sold on the secondary materials market. And secondary refers to the fact that these materials have been recovered for a second use. So as opposed to virgin resources, which are mined and used to produce products and packaging. This, as we know now, the secondary materials market is a global one. And we'll put a pin in that and come back to that in a little bit. But you can advance the slides now, Mike. Just showing you some of the pictures. These were photos that my team and I took. Go ahead. Yeah. Keep going. Last summer at a MRF in central Massachusetts. So you're seeing here baled milk and water jugs. That previous slide was things like detergent bottles. Go ahead. And then we've got our baled paper, mixed paper and cardboard, and keep going. Okay, got all those. All right. What you put in your recycling bin really matters. I want to take a little bit of time to focus on this. When you put the right stuff in your recycling bin, you are participating in a reverse supply chain that provides raw materials or manufacturing feedstock to companies across the US and actually the globe, who in turn produce a vast range of products and packaging that we use in our homes, in our schools, and our workplaces every day. So when we use recycled materials to make new stuff, we're reducing our reliance on virgin resources, which of course are extracted from the earth in massive and environmentally degrading mines that are predominantly located in poor communities in the global South. So recycling is a far better alternative than extracting our virgin and precious virgin resources. So let's take a quick look at what common household recyclables are turned into. Go ahead and advance the slide, Mike. So our glass becomes either new glass jars or bottles. That's true for glass that you're redeeming rather, deposit containers. It also is made into fiberglass insulation and into a construction material called processed glass aggregate, sort of a fancy word for glass that's been crushed up and cleaned, and it's used in public works projects for drainage and pipe bedding and road base. So let's go to our next slide. Aluminum cans become, wait for it, new aluminum cans. It takes roughly 60 days, I think this is just very cool, for an aluminum can to complete the cycle from your recycling bin to becoming a new filled aluminum can, beverage can on your local grocery store shelf. It's a fast process. And when we make aluminum cans out of old aluminum cans, we're using about 80% fewer greenhouse gas emissions than we would if we were using virgin materials. So again, you can see the benefits are significant. Next slide. We're just going to look at a couple of the plastic items, but clear plastic water and soda bottles become polar fleece, polyester fiber fill for jackets, a whole range of textiles, stuffing for sleeping bags, and carpet. They also can become new water and soda bottles. And I think we've got one more slide. Go ahead, Mike, for our paper. Household paper and cardboard becomes everything from new cardboard boxes to pizza boxes. Food packaging, things like cereal, cracker, and pasta boxes are usually made out of 100% recycled liner board. You can look for a little symbol on those packages that tells you that it's made from recycled material. So this stuff really does have a second life. Next slide, Mike. Yes, plastic tubs and lids, so things like yogurt containers. This is a slide I took from a company in southern US, and they're taking this material and making a whole range of projects that you can see, everything from paint cans to cosmetic containers, razor handles, toothbrushes, and so on and so forth. All right, next slide. So remember, I mentioned that the secondary materials market is a global one, and we know that's certainly true. And as Adam mentioned, back in 2018, we heard a lot of stories about the Chinese government's new policy to restrict and then ultimately ban imports from the US and Europe of recycled paper and plastic. That policy was known as National Sword. In fact, did set off a global disruption in the secondary materials market. In the 2 decades leading up to 2018, the US had relied pretty heavily on China's voracious demand for our recycled paper and our plastics, which they use to make the packaging, to ship stuff back to us. Everything from TVs and cell phones to athletic shoes and clothing came right back to the US. But what happened over the course of this period, and Adam alluded to the fact that we were seeing declines in what was going to China. In 2013, they imposed something called the Green Fence, which started it was sort of the first shot across the bow. So putting some restrictions on what they would take from the US. But what happened is the US recycling industry really became overly dependent on the Chinese market because it paid well. And it also tolerated, frankly, a lot of non-recyclable stuff that went along in the bales. So bales of paper have a lot of plastic in them, plastic bags, even plastic bottles. And by the same token, plastic contained things that weren't plastic. So their policy really did sort of force a reckoning in the US recycling industry. I mean, it was clearly time for the US recycling industry to raise its standards and to produce a cleaner product. And that meant they were also going to be sending it to other countries when China said, no, thank you, and officially banned all imports of paper in beginning of 2020. Countries like India, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, Korea, were taking up some of the slack, but they also said, we don't want the dirty recyclables either, no more than China did. So this was really kind of a wake-up call for the US recycling industry. Next slide. So, just as like the recycling industry standards had gotten kind of lax, well, the American public had a lot to do with it as well. We were, and actually still are, contributing to dirty recycling streams. We'd kind of become a nation of wish cyclers. Many of us are well-intentioned. We're thinking, well, this Halloween decoration is made of plastic, so, it can probably be recycled, right? Or, I'm not sure whether this item can be recycled, so I'll put it in the recycling bin anyway, and hopefully they'll figure it out. In fact, MRFs told us, MRFs in Massachusetts and actually across the nation told us a few years ago that 1 in 4 items that people put in their recycling bins are a contaminant. So just think about that, 25% of what the recycling truck delivers to a MRF has to be sorted out and thrown away. That's pretty staggering, and it's costly. We are trying to move the needle on that. What do we mean when we say, contaminants? Well, in 2018, Mass DEP met with the operators of the 9 MRFs in Massachusetts, and we asked them, what are the biggest problem materials that you're finding in your facilities? What do you not want to get? And this is what they are. You can see it's bagged plastics. A lot of people think that you tie your plastics up in a nice, neat plastic bag and put them in the recycling bin, that's just fine. Well, in fact, at the MRF, they pull that bag off the conveyor and it goes straight into the trash. They do not have time to open a plastic bag and empty the perfectly good recyclables inside of it. Plastic bags and wrap are the second category. Food and liquid. If you've been to a MRF, you've seen just amazing things coming through there. Amazing things that you don't want to see. Tanglers, this category consists of things like plastic garden hoses, holiday string lights, electronic cords, and then lastly, believe it or not, textiles, sheets, towels, clothing, all this stuff wraps around the gears and the screens and equipment at the MRF and causes shutdowns in the facility where workers have to actually climb up and cut off the tanglers manually before they can start operations again. Next slide. So because of the widespread contamination and recycling, in 2018, Mass DEP created the Recycle Smart MA initiative. This is an educational initiative, and it's with a simple mission, and that is to educate Massachusetts residents about what can and cannot go in the recycling. And we rolled out this initiative through our website, through our social media channels, our newsletter, which features a deep dive into different recycling topics, things like what happens to the plastic bags and wrap that you take back to supermarkets, or are pizza boxes really recyclable? And spoiler alert, the answer is yes, but I'm sure you all knew that. We also advertise on social media and do Google search and display ads to drive folks to our website to learn more about this. Next slide. Another part of the Recycle Smart MA campaign is what we call the Recyclopedia. It's a search tool that provides recycling answers to, I think we're up to over 700 household items. And you can learn whether the item belongs in the trash, in the recycling, whether it should be taken to a special recycling location like plastic bags and wrap go back to supermarkets or grocery stores, or whether it should be donated. And we invite municipalities to embed the Recyclopedia on your website. It's free, and we will send you the information to help you do that. I think we've got 70 municipalities that have done that so far. Some, like Cambridge, have actually purchased their own Recyclopedia tool, and so that's great too. Next slide. Let's see. Okay. Caption up here. All right, so just back to recycling markets. Prices for paper and plastic plummeted in 2018 and 2019 because there was this huge oversupply when China said no thanks. The restrictions on our recyclables meant they had to go elsewhere. They were certainly not the only export market, but the limits imposed on our paper and plastics did really send reverberations around the world. But I like to say when one door closes, another opens, or sort of this is what the silver lining was, that in the last 5 years, U.S. companies have invested billions of dollars in building new recycling mills in the States and in North America, and even more so converting virgin mills to recycling mills, really to fill the void left by China. So virgin paper mills that used trees to make paper products have been retrofitted to use recycled paper and cardboard instead. And the same is true for plastic recycling. Since 2010, US plastic recyclers have gone from buying 37% of their plastic from US sources to 92% of their plastic from US sources. So that means MRFs and other recycling processors are sending their plastics to domestic recyclers. The southeastern part of the United States is a major plastic recycling hub for the eastern, northeastern part of the US. And much of the plastic from our MRFs goes to Alabama and to the Carolinas, to companies like KW Plastics. I showed you a slide earlier of what they're making out of our milk jugs, our laundry detergent bottles, and our yogurt containers and margarine tubs and lids, making those into all kinds of new products. So this is kind of the good news story. So where are we today? This is where you all come in. We are simply not recycling enough to meet the needs of the recycling industry. The demand for recycled aluminum, paper, and particularly plastic is far greater than the supply. And the recycling industry and major consumer brands, think Coke, Pepsi, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, they need more recycled feedstock in order to meet the demands of consumers who want more sustainable packaging and products. So, and then potentially even more significant are the impending requirements resulting from a host of new, really groundbreaking laws, recycling laws that have been passed in states, including California, Maine, New Jersey, Colorado, and Oregon. These are laws known as extended producer responsibility laws that require manufacturers to make their products and packaging using increasing levels of recycled materials, and also that they take some of the burden off of local government by paying for the cost of our local recycling programs, or at least some of the cost. And there are at least a dozen more bills like these pending in many state legislators, including in Massachusetts. So what does this mean? We're going to have to seriously ramp up our recycling effort to meet that demand. And where will we find those recyclables? Well, sadly, the answer is in the trash. This pie chart shows what Massachusetts residents and businesses sent to our landfills and incinerators in 2022. You can find a detailed breakdown, and the material gets sorted into 60 categories on our website. Just to put a point on one sliver of this, last year we sent 4,700 tons of soda bottles, beverage container bottles, to landfills and incinerators. That's 229 million water bottles in 1 year that literally went in the trash. And then, as you all know, because you got the quiz answer right, the single largest segment of material that we send to the trash is organic materials, food waste. And if we had time for another hour of presentation, we would talk a lot about organics. I know Cambridge is a leader, has been a leader in that since you've been collecting organics at the curb, Mike, for 5 years, 6 years, a long time. Really impressive. All right, this is my last slide. We talked about textiles. I actually neglected to include a slide about that, but most of you are aware of it. And if you don't know what to do with your textiles, you can go to Recycle Smart MA and use our Beyond the Bin search tool, a separate search tool for things that don't go in your recycling bin, but that can be dropped off at other donation and recycling locations. And I'll just leave you with a few thoughts about what each of us can do to help. Of course, make sure you're recycling right. I can't say enough about that. Take the Smart Recycling quiz on our website, and you'll learn about common recycling mistakes. Reduce food waste in your home. Compost the leftover scraps either in your backyard compost bin or through a municipal service, or by subscribing to an organics collection vendor. And there are 4 or 5 of them serving Greater Boston. Reduce your plastic footprint. And I've included a link to an article called Breaking Up with Plastic from our newsletter. There are a number of ways you can do that, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of them right now. Buy secondhand. Buy secondhand, borrow that specialty kitchen gadget, or maybe that post hole digger that you're probably only going to use once from your local library of things. There's almost 100 libraries in Massachusetts that lend out a huge variety of tools and household items. Try repairing that broken toaster before you replace it. Many communities host fix-it clinics or repair cafes. And last but not least, get involved with your local recycling or sustainability committee, because I'm really a strong believer that the most significant change happens at the local level. In the past 5 years, more than 160 municipalities have passed laws to eliminate plastic bags, styrofoam containers from takeout, and sale of even single-serve bottled water in plastic. So think globally, act locally is the thought I'm going to leave you with. And I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to talk with you all.
Okay, thank you, Brooke, very much for all that information. And maybe what you could do is put some of those links into the chat box.
I will do
so
that.
Folks can take a look. So I'll invite Mira and Adam back for Q&A, because we have run really close to time, but want to get some of these questions answered. So I'm going to start near the top. Let's go with about phones. When should we recycle versus reuse them? And I guess who should be the best to answer that? Maybe Adam, do you want to go?
Yes, I guess. I mean, it's really tough to say. I mean, I use my phones until they can't be updated anymore, and I think that's a good way to do it, just for security purposes. It all depends where you are, and what your technology uses. But I encourage people to use their phones as long as they can at least keep them supported with security updates. And on the flip side of it is, I encourage you to buy a secondhand phone, because there's a lot of them out there, and nothing reduces your impact more than reusing, ensuring that there isn't another phone being manufactured.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and as you saw in Adam's presentation, those phones might end up in China. They might get, resold to someone that doesn't have a phone to begin with. And so a lot of value in that. All right, so next question. This might be Adam or Brooke. How does the cost of transporting items overseas play a role? Are small items more likely to be reused due to shipping cost?
Interesting question. I'll take a stab at that. Transportation has become a lot more expensive domestically and overseas. There's been a huge shortage in shipping containers. I was in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, and there were dozens of freighters waiting to get into the port of Los Angeles. So we've had major transportation snarls in this country and on our oceans. It's part of the cost of recycling. I don't know that I understand the question about smaller items.
Maybe that's electronic items like cell phones. So, you know, when Adam is, you know, interviewing Robin, you know, how does Robin make that work? And so, you know, isn't part of it, I think one big caveat to take away from all this is that items are not just shipped and dumped somewhere, they're bought, correct?
Right, they're purchased. I mean, we use the term dumping too much in this country. I've never seen anything dumped. There's always somebody who's buying it. I mean, it's just like Amazon. There's somebody in the destination country who's imported that item and is picking up the cost of the shipping as well. Brooke can attest to this as well. I mean, the two main costs of recycling are purchasing the stuff, the recyclables, and then transportation. And that transportation could be from your curb 3 blocks away to the MRF, or it could be, you know, from a Best Buy to somewhere overseas. It just varies. The size of the item doesn't matter in most cases. Global shipping is determined. The price of global shipping is determined by weight, not the size of something. The only time size of something comes in is if it's really big and not very heavy. So, but otherwise, because you want to pack as much weight into a container as you can.
The next question is actually more of a comment. This is, I think, for Mira. The milk packet cutting idea was really, really novel when it came out. This person said, I was in India when the video was circulated and been using the idea for every plastic cover I cut ever since. So you've got a big fan out there, Mira.
Wow. And I've been doing the same. What a coincidence that someone who's watching this webinar also saw that. Yeah. I wish we could find a way to recycle plastic bags, you know, the harder, the ones that we can't actually even put into the recycling center, like but yeah, it really hurts to throw those bags in the trash.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not all plastics are recyclable yet.
Yeah.
But a couple more questions came in on the greenhouse gas emissions related to shipping, and you know, has someone done the research to figure out, is it better to ship recyclables abroad? And I guess, you know, one of the caveats is that most recyclables are not being shipped from Massachusetts. They're mostly domestic. Some papers are sent international, but, you know, I think maybe Brooke, you could talk to this, but, you know, part of it being shipped there is, yeah, that has emissions, but also they're making items from that paper there in those countries like Thailand or Vietnam, and then sending those items back to us, the consumers.
That's right. I mean, where we really need to, I like to say, we're not going to recycle our way out of this problem. Recycling is really, you know, perfectly honest, it's an end of tailpipe strategy. It's what we do with stuff when we're done using it. There's an estimate, I almost included this in my slide, that for every ton of waste we dispose, so a package or an old cell phone or a piece of clothing, there's 70 tons of waste upstream. So that means extracting those resources, refining and processing those resources to be able to make them into a manufacturing stock. That usually happens somewhere, you know, halfway around the world. Getting this into a manufacturing plant, getting them to a distribution center, to the retailer, into our homes, and then we throw them away. We really have to start focusing on upstream, which means refusing, repairing, reusing, and borrowing, sharing, the sharing economy, because that's where we're going to have the most impact on our carbon footprint. There's a huge amount of embodied energy in the materials that we use, and that's a whole nother presentation. Massachusetts has recently adopted an action plan to tackle those that and try to start working upstream, so that recycling cannot be the only tool in our toolbox. We just won't get there.
I just had one thing on the shipping question. I think there's a tendency to view recycling in a vacuum, that there's recycling and there's nothing. And it's very important to view recycling as a commodity business, and recycling competes with virgin raw materials. And so when you start asking, you know, what is the carbon impact of shipping, you know, a load of whatever to China, you also have to compare it to what will the carbon impact be of a raw material that's the substitute for that recycling, and inevitably virgin raw materials are going to have a higher impact. So I don't think you can just look at it in a vacuum of what's the carbon impact of shipping that recycling. You have to compare it to the alternatives. I mean, because secondary raw materials competes with virgin.
Yeah, my favorite line that I think you have, Adam, is the dirtiest recycling is always cleaner than the cleanest mining and extraction. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that there are environmental impacts to shipping recyclables, or environmental impacts to all that, but it's still better than mining it and cutting down forests. So, okay, I hope that answers that question. And Mira, if you have the video for the milk bag, could you put it in the chat for me, and I'll put it to everyone else?
Sure.
So here's the question: how effective are Apple's and other electronic companies' recycling programs? Anyone know that one?
I'll take a stab at that. I have pretty bad relationship with Apple PR because of some of the things I've written on this. My issue with Apple's recycling, it goes back to the question we had earlier, is when should we recycle a phone? And for Apple, Apple likes to see phones in its recycling supply chain early. And we've all seen the videos of its recycling robot. Those are, when you look at the phones that are being recycled in Apple's ecosystem of recycling, those are phones that have markets in emerging market countries. So in my opinion, Apple recycles stuff way too early. Now, I can't say this for a fact, but I think the presumption is amongst a lot of people who report on Apple is Apple would like to eliminate some of those older phones because they compete with other sales. They want to control the market a little bit. That's my personal opinion. But whatever it is, when you look at Apple's recycling robots and look at what is being recycled in those are phones that do have reuse markets in other places. So I'm not a real fan of when Apple recycles.
Okay. All right, so here's a very complicated one. When a city or town calculates its community-wide greenhouse gases, incinerated waste represents a negligible percentage of emissions. Emissions reductions from recycling doesn't even show up. So municipal carbon reduction efforts are focused on buildings, transportation, and energy supply. How do we translate recycling and waste reduction into carbon reduction efforts?
Very simple. It's called a consumption-based emissions inventory. Oregon, Mass DP sister agency in Oregon did this, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. EPA actually even did work on this. They published this in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. When we look at all the upstream, basically the life cycle emissions in the stuff, what we drive, what we wear, what we sit on, what we sleep on, our computers. That's where we are measuring the true carbon costs of that material. The way most states, including Massachusetts, look at it is we only measure carbon that's generated inside our borders, which is kind of silly because we don't really make anything here. Yes, we do drive cars. Of course, there's carbon emissions from cars and construction and heating our homes. But when you do the consumption-based analysis, that little teeny sliver, which is what the carbon generated from disposing or recycling of stuff we're finished with, looks more like 38 to 40% is what we consume and drive and wear, and et cetera, et cetera. So EPA is actually doing a consumption-based emissions inventory for most of the Northeast states, and we'll be seeing that coming out soon. But yeah, it's a huge issue.
Okay, I want to keep you guys for just one more minute with this last question. How can we help encourage manufacturers and retail stores reduce packaging at the source? Often food is wrapped in plastic and there's plastic boxes and it's becoming ubiquitous. Are there any thoughts on that, or if that's something that could happen down the line?
I'm going to say, make your voice heard. brand names and they are sensitive to their customers' wants and needs. This is why they're all falling over each other to try and make commitments for recycled content. If you have a product you like, but you hate the package, send an email to that company and tell them. It sounds silly, but it actually really does make a difference. So start emailing and complaining, and also frankly, refuse packaging. Refuse packaging when you get the huge, amounts of styrofoam at the retailer. Just unpack your, whatever you've purchased and leave that styrofoam behind. Make it their problem. That's my tips.
Okay. Anyone else, or should we wrap it up for the night? Okay, well, I know there's several more questions in the Q&A. Sorry we didn't get to them all. Again, this is going to be recorded. Thank you everyone for being here. And if you have any questions on getting the recording, you can just hit reply on the registration email that you received. But thank you again to Adam, Mira, and Brooke. Thank you so much for enlightening us and sharing all this information.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
a lot of fun.
Thanks for
Take
having
care,
me. Appreciate it.
everybody.
Thank you, and thanks to the recycling coordinators for being here.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Night.